This video is all about complex masking in the new Lightroom 11 version. Now, so far this channel has been all about Darktable, the free open source raw editing application. But I can't resist doing a little bit of basic maths. And these new selections in Lightroom are really interesting from that point of view. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how these tools work. So what is the addition, subtraction and intersection, and how to make some nice complex masks using those three operations. I'll do this in two videos. This is the first one, and well, let's see how that goes. I'm Nicholas. Let's do this together. Let's start out by a little bit of elementary maths, which is going to be really important to understand what we're doing to get complex selections with the new Lightroom 11. So the first thing is I've drawn a rectangle here which represents your photo, and I'd just like to show you the three things that in maths you can do with a set, which is what masks can be said to represent. So a zone of the photo, maybe a radial filter or a brush stroke. We'll call this A. This selection is A. So we have it here. This is A. The first thing we can do in math is what we call the complementary, which is written A bar, and in Lightroom it's called the inverse, or what you do is you invert. So the complementary of A, which is A bar, is everything that is not A. So if you have a brush stroke or a circle, it's everything outside the brush stroke, outside the circle. That is the only thing you can do with when you only have one selection or one set. If you have two sets, A and B, then what you can do is the union of the two, which is written A union B in maths, and which in Lightroom is called add. And what that does, if I'll get a bit of a bigger brush stroke here, if you do the union, you add. So you have the first selection is there, and you add something, then it selects everything that is either in one or in the other or in both. So this in maths is the word or. There, in inverted commas. The last thing you can do, and there are only two operations you can do on sets, whatever you might be tricked into thinking. If you have A and B, then you have the intersection. Now, intersection, which is written in maths A intersection B, in Lightroom it's written intersect. And what it means is that you are in the intersection of two masks if you are in both masks at the same time. So you have to be in one mask and you have to be in the other. Or you have to be in one mask and in a luminance range, or and in a color range. The intersection is adding on constraints, and they all have to be true for that part of the picture to be selected. Now, you've been tricked into thinking that there is something called subtract. Now, that is not really true. Well, it is true, there is a subtraction. But what is the subtraction in maths? Well, it is, let's say you have A. Now, there is an order to subtractions, and there's no order to intersections or unions. Well, here there is an order. If we want to do A and we want to subtract, so let's do a slanted, I should write this first. Subtract A minus B. What we're doing is we kind of want to remove everything that is, if we want to subtract B from A, so we take A and we subtract everything that was in B. So we want to remove this part here, and so the result of the subtraction is everything that's in yellow. So what are we doing? We've got two things happening at the same time. We want two things to be true. We want to be in A, and we want to be not in B. So really a subtraction is an intersection with the complementary of B. So we are in A and we are not in B. Now that's important to understand when we're going to try and invert masks, which hasn't kind of happened in a natural way yet in Lightroom. So let's jump into Lightroom and see how we can use these in a practical example. Let's start with this first example. So here I am, I've selected the menu for local adjustments. Let's just verify what we were talking about with unions, intersections and subtractions. Let's take a new gradient radial filter there. Now, if I add another radial gradient, then I am in fact doing the union of both. Here you can see the selection. That is the union. That's the first drawing I did previously. If I subtract this, so I can change this radial gradient to convert to subtract, then I am taking the first one and removing the contents of the second one. Now, normally you can change the order, and here, see, I've put the radial gradient 2 at the bottom of the stack, so the first one, this one, and I can convert that to subtract. And this one, I need to say this one's nothing. So what I've got is, now I've got the first one and I'm subtracting the second one. So you can change the order of the masks. I'll do that again. The one at the base is in a subtraction, which is nonsense for the base mask. So that needs to be converted to add. And this one is on add, and you can do subtract, convert to subtract. There we are. So I've got this radial gradient 1. I've subtracted the second one. Now, so subtracting is an intersection. So I'd like to convert to intersect, but I can't. But what I can do is if I invert the second mask, I am actually doing the intersection between the two masks. So a subtraction is just an intersection with the inverse of a mask. There we are. That was just to show you how you can play around with these tools. Let's get rid of that and start selecting for real. So 3 dots here, delete mask, and let's go. I'd like to select the head of the cat here to make some adjustments. Imagine I want to add some sharpness, some clarity. So I've gone to select subject, which does a wonderful job. It is one piece of machine learning in photo software that I really think is working well. We've had some advertising for AI content for years, but this is, for me, the first time I've actually been wowed by what it can do. Now, I have a selection. I use the dehaze. I often use the dehaze to check the selection, see what it's like. And here you can see the selection's not bad. I have some kind of haloing at the back there. But that's not too bad. I could get rid of that. I'll show you how to get rid of that on another example. What I want to do here is just select the head of the cat. So you'd think that you want to subtract a brush, and you get kind of a large brush, maybe with auto mask, and you kind of subtract. Maybe you want to have more feathering if you think that's better. But whatever happens, I won't do it all, just to show you what's happening is that if I dehaze, the transition is very harsh. It's difficult to do a transition like that. So the suggestion that I make is get rid of this brush. And remember that when we're making complex masks, it's all about unions and intersection. So I have the subject here. If I press on O, I can see the subject again. And I'm going to intersect it with a radial gradient because the head is roughly the shape of a radial gradient, and I can control the feather of this. And if I'm sharpening, let's say what's important is to have selected what you want, but also to have a nice smooth transition between what is selected and what is not. So now if I do the dehaze trick, you'll see that I'm getting hardly any artifacts on the edges whatsoever. So I could go and add some texture or some clarity, whatever, and I'm not ruining that in any way, shape or form. Now imagine I want to select the eyes. So let's create a new mask, and imagine maybe we want to start with a brush. Now when you think, let's zoom in, and if I have the auto mask on, then Lightroom will do a very good job selecting the eyes. Now if I've selected a bit too much, press on Option or Alt on Windows to take away what's gone over the edges. And if you have a look, the quality of the mask there, well, it's not bad. What I have done is selected all these dark areas, you see, which if I wanted, let's say, to add a bit of saturation, there's no real point in selecting those. Another way you can do this, maybe a bit more refined, is if I delete that, is create a new mask with a brush, remove the auto mask and just paint over. And then I will intersect with a colour range. And with the colour range there, I can just pick, let's say, a colour, blue. So you notice there's some blue, obviously, outside there. And now if I want a larger range, instead of, I can click in different places. I think that'll make a difference. Or I can click and drag to choose a range, but that's too much. So let's just pick one that wasn't too bad. That's a little bit too much, isn't it? You have the refine filter here. If you want to whittle down a little bit, just to the parts of the eye that are more blue, more saturated, if you like, in blue. And then with this, I can open this mask up, subtract a brush with the auto mask, take a small size, and I can actually remove now manually what's on the outside. And if you look at the selection now with dehaze, I actually have maybe a more natural transition between the lights and the darks. And maybe that's a better quality brush selection, I mean. And what you can do is go back to brush number 1, and if you can't see what I'm doing, I'll go into overlay there, and if I just brush around, then I'm actually selecting the second eye as well. Now I haven't got the lighter colours, so I can go back to the colour range, let's say, and I select that, press on Shift, maybe select a bit more. If I've got too much, press on Option, get rid of that part, go onto the brush where I removed some parts of the mask, remove some more. You can refine your mask like that. You could make 2 separate masks, one for each eye, and I think we have kind of a good idea of what you can do with the mask selections there. Okay, let's go on to another example. So in this photo of a bridge that's fading out into the morning mist, I like to make a selection of the bridge, maybe to add a bit of clarity, I don't know, colour, whatever you want. So let's go to select subjects. I'm still in these in the selection in the mask menu, select subject, and it's made a pretty decent selection of the upper part of the bridge, but the 2 pillars here hasn't quite decided whether it's going to select in the water or and the two pillars. This one not at all. So in this case, I would suggest adding a brush stroke, so that's a union, and maybe colouring that in. And then you'll see we have a problem with the water here, is how far do I go? I colour in here, then I've coloured over the edges there, so press on Option to remove, and like a quick selection of the pillars of the bridge there. But if I go on to dehaze to check the quality of the mask, you see the transitions are very hard there in the water. And the problem is choosing exactly at what point I'm keeping the selection and what point I'm not. So go back to brush, press on O to see the mask. Now what I can suggest is that you paint a little bit too much on both of the pillars. There we are, make something kind of smooth there. This is an awful mask. Look at that, terrible. But what we can do is an intersection with a linear gradient. And the linear gradient that would kind of be something like that. And now you see, by intersecting with a linear gradient, I have a nice smooth transition into the water, whatever I want to do to the bridge. So that is one idea. Now I have another problem. Just remind you, the intersection works because an intersection means you have to be in both masks at the same time. Now I have 3 masks here. If you look at the pile, the one at the bottom is the first one. It's the main selection, the subject. I've added on a union of the brush, and the order of operations is from bottom to top, like you do from left to right in mathematics. So I'm doing the union of brush 1 and subject 1, and I'm intersecting the union of these two with a linear gradient. So to be in the final mask, I have to be in the linear gradient, and I have to be in the union of these two. And that's why it works. I'm not quite done because I want another intersection, because I want to remove the gaps, the sky behind the bridges there. You see it's all filled in. So intersect if you like, subtract if you like, it's the same thing. I'll do a subtraction, and I'm going to subtract a luminance range. I'm going to remove, I'll just click somewhere. Let's have a look what it's done. And I'm removing the portion of lightness here in the luminance range. It's removing that. So it's an intersection with the dark parts, if you like. So I'll be in the mask if I'm in the dark parts and I'm in everything else that was selected before. So now I have a pretty good selection. I should think of the bridge, in which case I can put quite a lot of dehaze. And if you think it's leaving off too abruptly in the shadows over there, let's have a look. Maybe that's the luminance range that needs to change. Let's press on O, and maybe I can get a little bit more back by a smaller feather. This is the feather on the luminance range. This is the hard part. And there's a feather on either side, just to go off gradually. And that is very important in masks. The graduation between what's selected and what's not needs to be well made, either abrupt here because it's easy to do, or in difficult parts you need to find a way to have some nice smooth feathering. So anyway, that looks okay. Let's try and make a selection of the sky. So let's get a new mask and make a selection of the sky. Now the selection is quite good to start with. We do have the gaps between the parts of the bridge there. We have a problem here on the horizon where there were some trees. We'll try and get rid of that problem. So let's do an intersection, or let's subtract if you like, luminance range. So I'm going to remove the dark parts to the photo. So rather than clicking, I can actually move this luminance range. If you can't see it, press on O. And there's nothing happening there because there's nothing happening. Invert the mask. That's it. And now I can move this back, remove all the darks there. You can see the transition is there. So what I would say is you go a little bit too far, and then you come back with some smoothing. And try and make it nice and smooth so that you can't see the edges, because you will see the edges when you start doing drastic modifications after to the image. Now there's a little problem still there, and the trick, I'll use it once more, is an intersection with a linear gradient. That should give me, I'll start, though this is the line of 100%, where it starts leaving off here to 0 at the bottom. So maybe something like that. And I have a little bit less of a problem. It's not that easy to do in this example. Maybe move that up a little bit. Yeah, that's better, isn't it? Now, I'm not counting on doing anything drastic, but what I wanted to do with this sky is move the dehaze backwards to lighten it a bit. Yeah, so before and after. So I don't add a bit of brightness to the sky, if you want, rather than adding exposure. I think adding dehazing or removing dehazing makes a nicer picture. Okay, let's move to the last photo. Okay, so this is not an easy one. I like to make a selection of the damselfly and keep the transparency in the wings. That is the difficult part. So let's go to the local adjustments, select subject. Okay, so it's got the subject there. It's got too much, thinks the leaf is the subject. Why not? Let's expand that menu. So we will subtract maybe a brush, that's the quickest. Remove auto mask, make the mask a bit larger. And this is where it's useful to have a tablet with a pen. Okay, get most of it done around there, and then Z to zoom in, space bar to shift along, add the auto mask, and the Lightroom actually does a very good job. I can paint around, try and keep the legs there on the leaf. I do quite a bit of subtracting here with the brush. There, I can go around here, a little bit underneath. Okay, we have another gap here. There, that was selected. Did too much. Press on Option, Alt. Remove that. Check the dehaze, how well I'm doing. It's not too bad. And now we have the problem of the wings, the transparency. Now, I could actually do this in 2 goes. I could make a mask and just try and keep the dark parts of the image, which are the wings. If I try to do it all in 1 go, then I would like to remove from my selection a color range. So really, I want to remove the greens. So let's remove a green. I can't see what I'm doing there, but if I press on O, it's come back again. And I change, so that's what I've selected, go on the mask, and that's what's left. It's actually not too shabby. I can refine either by removing more or removing less. Maybe if I do something like this, I think actually it's not too bad. Press on O, Z to zoom out. And if I dehaze, the wings are getting a bit dark, a bit lighter. I think I could do quite a lot on the damselfly just like that. So it's quite a powerful tool to remove a color range. So, well, there we are. I think you've got the idea of intersections and unions. So what's left to learn? Well, there's one thing we haven't seen is how to invert a mask, because this mask number 1 here is the damselfly. But imagine I want to change the colours of the greens, all the greens on the photo. Then I'd have to do the complementary of this mask. And Lightroom can't do that. There's no invert a complex mask. I could, sorry, just open that and invert the subject here. Select subject, invert. I can invert each one individually, but inverting a whole mask, no, it's not there. And it's not as simple as inverting each component. And we'll keep that for the next video, where we'll do some simple maths and understand how to invert it. I'm sure there will be an update to Lightroom one day. There's something else that's missing, is that in the adding and subtracting, especially in the subtracting, I can subtract from mask all sorts of things, but not a previous mask or a previous complex mask that I already made. So that's a bit of a pity. I'd like that to make its appearance into a future update. And the other thing that I'm really missing, that we have, I use Darktable. It's a free open source raw editor, which is actually very powerful in the mask selection. And in Darktable, when you are choosing what's called parametric masks, so the parametric masks are the color range and luminance range, so masks that have parameters, there is one where you can choose the frequency. So you can, frequency is high frequency, low frequency. So low frequency is typically the out of focus areas, and high frequency where there is detail, the sharp areas. And you can actually make selections based on that. So it would make things easier if I wanted to select the wings, maybe, would be to remove the low frequencies and the background would go. And that is a useful tool to have. So I'm missing that here. But this new update in Lightroom 11 with the new selections is a big update and makes our life much easier. So yeah, I'm pleased for that. So anyway, this is the end of this video, and I hope to see you all soon.